Okay, so to get started, what are sustainable landscapes? And basically, it's kind of this concept of using sustainable landscapes to improve the environment. It's a more cost-effective approach to make, and what we're looking at are these measurable improvements to the environment. And a lot of this is being driven, for years it was more related to kind of intangibles, improving the environment, saying we're doing things that are good, and that we're seeing benefits, but I think it's only been recently that we've been able to quantify those benefits. And then we actually have the regulatory drivers that are starting to come into place that are requiring that quantification of the benefits. So I think that is something that, and we'll be talking about this a little bit later, has really been driving this industry as a whole. Are those regulatory drivers and the fact that we're starting to get the quantification of those benefits in place. So it's not just the feel-good anymore. We're getting data, we're getting information, and there's regulations that are driving it. So we're pretty excited about that because I think it's going to take this approach farther into the mainstream because we have the metrics, we have the information to back it up. And basically it's using these plants to provide those ecosystem services or those water quality benefits, the plants and the systems that are created with that to help enhance the environment. So sustainable. There are, if you look this up and you hear people talking, there are hundreds of definitions for sustainability, or whatever it might be. For purposes of this manual, for purposes of what we're doing here, we're looking at relating it to being a method of harvesting or using a resource so that the resource is not depleted or permanently damaged. So it's making sure that we have protected that resource and that it's sustainable and long-term. Landscape. Landscape is the landform of a region, portion of the territory that can be viewed at one time from one place to another. So it's where you're working, and it's overall kind of the basis of what we're looking at. So you pull that all together and you enable that natural and built systems to work together to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So we're saying, bottom line, I think very simply, we're looking at doing things now that are a benefit for the future and for the long term. And I think that that's something that with these sustainable landscapes is really probably one of the biggest challenges. I'm going to be talking about a lot of challenges with this, but these landscapes take time. They aren't instant. They change. I talked yesterday about how not only do they change from season to season, they change from year to year. The plants even move around. They start to colonize. Some will disappear, some will come back. So we're nurturing nature to a degree, and we as humans have a tough time with that sometimes because we can't control it. And so we'll be talking more about that today, but I think that that's probably the biggest challenge with this is how it changes over time, and we're basically nurturing that long-term sustainability overall for the world. So what are the driving forces? This is way big picture, and I guess what they say is you start in your backyard. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is what can be done, us as practitioners, a little bit at a time. But the big picture, what we're trying to achieve, is looking at some of these big drivers. So we have climate change, we have, which we're hearing more and more about, water quality degradation, which is really what's driving all the regulations and things like that. Increase in impervious cover, we've been talking about it for years, the increase in development, increase in just basically how our landscapes have been changed, and the fact that the land is less permeable than it was even just 20 to 50 years ago, which is this much when we're looking at the, the history of our country and the world. So reduce biodiversity. This is something that's really, a lot of times it's looked at as well. That's kind of the bugs and bunnies part of it, but it's critical, and it's interesting when you do have success in establishing more of a natural or successional landscape. The amount of biodiversity that starts to come into play, it's really exciting to see. The difference between a mowed lawn and just how sterile that landscape can be compared to just a meadow, and the difference in the variety of wildlife that you can just envision or just experience as part of that. So that's exciting. And the negative effects of the changing landscape, we need to pay closer attention to what we plant, how we manage our open spaces. I think too that has been a matter of convenience, comfort and convenience. What's the easiest way to manage it and maintain it? And a lot of times it's easiest just to put the grass down, have the guy mow it because he knows how to do it, and be done with it and move on to the next thing. So looking at what we can do from that standpoint. So functional landscapes, this is taking that idea of creating these successional landscapes, but tying it into what I was talking about earlier about the quantification and the metrics and the engineering component of it. So taking landscapes that not only have a nice aesthetic and fit into character or of a community or a residence or something like that, but adding another level, which is actually the function. And the function is what we can look at from a quantification standpoint and to meet some of the regulations. So typically landscapes were just a single function, more for aesthetics, more for the number of plants and the seasonal interest and blocking views or framing views and all those kinds of things. But we're looking at mimicking natural systems to meet some of these regulations. So that's a functional benefit. This project is a restored floodplain. The picture here is actually a bioretention area that addresses runoff from a roadway, cleans it, and filters it before it actually goes into the floodplain itself. So the whole point here is we have function and we're also have an aesthetic. So the idea is, how do we get to that point and how are we successful with that is what we're going to be talking about today. So this is kind of a simple graphic to show how this works, but single function, we always looked at, we have a site and we put in the detention, we put in our parking, and we put in our building, and we plant our trees around it, and we put our, what I kind of refer to sometimes as the icing on it, which is the landscaping to make it look pretty. But everything kind of has a single function. It was there for the parking is to park the car, and the stormwater is to put take your stormwater through. And I think our land is a lot more valuable than that. I think we need to look at stocking those benefits as much as possible. And we're starting to see more of that, even with parking lots that infiltrate, and we've seen basketball courts that are used to store stormwater. Starting to stock them. What we're going to be really looking at and focusing on is how can we take these successional landscapes and sustainable kind of natural systems and use them for multiple benefits. And these benefits can include everything from stormwater to water quality to biodiversity, all those things that we were just talking about in one location that we really make the best use of the land. So A couple terms that I want to go through just to clarify. One is what is green infrastructure and low impact development. You guys have all heard the term low impact development. The green infrastructure, that's been kind of a key term that's become kind of come into the stratosphere, I guess, in the last couple of years. But green infrastructure is basically looking at all of those, what I call kind of those fringe areas, and what can be done outside of the buildable areas that we can start to stack those benefits. And so provided plants that provide those ecosystem services and in the managed landscape. So low impact development is looking at ways of being as efficient as possible with your buildable area and being as light on the land as possible. So that is more related to land development, site development, and things like that, and integrating these kind of green infrastructure features into it. And then best management practices. I'm sure everyone knows what BMPs are. Best management practices relate to specifically the stormwater management and stormwater management that provides function, so water quality improvement and things like that. So here's a case study for anybody that we'd love to have you come down for the tour into Lancaster. There's a lot of groups down there that are really excited about what's been happening both in the city of Lancaster and in the suburbs in integrating these kind of new approaches to green infrastructure. And the city of Lancaster actually, to meet their regulations related to TMDLs, they were looking at either taking their sewage treatment plants and adding kind of more structural BMPs, best management practices, which would be huge costs associated with it to improve the water quality of the runoff from the city. What they chose to do, as opposed to putting all their money into something that really people can't see, is to take that and apply it in a green infrastructure plan that was developed for the city. And what they've been doing, I don't know if anyone's heard Charlotte Katzenmoyer speak about this approach in Lancaster County, but it's been pretty impressive, the results that they've had. They've quantified so far with the stormwater, the BMPs that they've implemented. Everything from alleys, pervious paving in alleys and things like that, to these kind of rain gardens, stormwater BMPs within parking lots, all throughout the city. So it's been a really, really neat process. They've also done a lot of work engaging residential homeowners in the city, providing some grant and a little bit of support so that they start to, on their own properties, implement rain gardens or putting in rain barrels and things like that. And they're really starting to see results at a lower cost so than it would have been to actually do those structural type of BMPs. So far it's a really successful model. It's been held up on a national level, and it's created a lot of buzz and excitement in Lancaster. So we hope you'll come down. Ruth Ann, thank you. Ruth Ann Hawker is the engineer for the city of Lancaster. She'll be speaking to us, showing us some of the projects in Lancaster as part of that tour. So enjoy this. All right, so this is kind of some of the stuff that we're going to go over that backs it up. There are various groups that have developed what they're terming as kind of their principles for sustainable site or sustainable design. And this is one program. It's called the Sustainable Sites Initiative. There's more information in the booklet about this. It's kind of based on something similar to LEED, which is the building industry's guide for creating energy efficient buildings. This is the site-related kind of model for LEED. And these are their guiding principles. So do not harm, precautionary principle, design with nature and culture, use a decision-making hierarchy of preservation, conservation, and regeneration. Regenerative systems of integrational equity, living process, systems thinking approach, collaborative and ethical approach, integrity, leadership, research, and environmental stewardship. So basically they have kind of a group, a think tank that starts to develop what are all these principles, and then from these principles they've developed a process to go through your site. Okay, so just kind of a summary of sustainable landscapes, just to kind of go back through that, and just how do we take all of that and how does it get applied. And the bottom line is we have a lot of complex challenges that are driving all of this. And when you start to look at it as a whole, and you look at even just those principles for sustainable landscapes, it's like, wow, all right, I just want to do something for my client on this property. Each little piece has a part of it, but I think we need to start somewhere, and we need to understand what those complex challenges are, but we also need to understand that every little bit that we try to do is going to make a difference. So overall, these sustainable landscapes, they consider what I was talking about, their short and long-term needs of the environment and the community. So we're looking, it takes patience, we're starting, we're kind of creating that catalyst, and ideally we want these landscapes to become a part, just knitted into the community, that a lot of times I feel we're most successful with these projects, that people really don't even notice them anymore. What we find is, right after they go in, when there's that change in the landscape, we get lots of questions, tons of questions. People are saying, this is horrible, it's changed, it's not what it was. They're uncomfortable. And then over time, people adjust to what they see, they adjust to the landscape, and then it becomes a part of it. Typically, that's about a 3-year process. And during that process, the landscape starts to just kind of settle out, and it becomes what ideally is sustainable over the long term. And then these functional landscapes serve multiple purposes. So that's another key point, I think, is to understand that we aren't doing this just for one thing. We're looking at taking these areas and really benefiting a lot. This is a project we talked about yesterday, Butterfly Acres in Lidditz. This is a project we'll take a look at if you can come down for the tour. It is a swale that goes through an existing community, probably built back in the 80s, maybe some of these homes in the 70s. And the swale itself had just been a drainage area through the community, mowed grass with a lot of water that ran through it periodically during stormwater events. And it was regenerated into this successional landscape of that is, has a variety of grasses and trees, but most importantly, it serves a function in that what we've done is restored this swale, which was identified as a critical aquifer recharge area, that it would actually recharge the groundwater. So there's trenches in here. The water flows along this swale, which drains a pretty significant area of watershed, and then discharges there's trenches that run perpendicular to the swale itself, about 12 to 15 foot deep, and they're about 6 foot wide, full of like a porous material, so the water flows along there and then goes down into the ground and infiltrates. So what looks like, yeah, it's just kind of another, landscape area. There's a lot going on here, a lot of function. And it's within an existing residential community, and yes, when they went through the change, they were like, what is going on? We had to do a lot of education, a lot of working with the group up front so that they knew that this wasn't just you know, the borough and the other groups involved weren't just doing something because they thought it was a good thing. They were doing something to really benefit beyond just the aesthetics of it. So, okay. And I think a point, too, that needs to be made is, for those of us in the landscape industry, there is, you know, this trend, and I see it kind of as a tipping point, too, but, you know, we've got the regulatory drivers that are driving a lot of these kind of more naturalized landscapes. At the same time, what we're seeing is you know, there's some landscape architects that are promoting this approach too, but more from an aesthetic standpoint. And this is exciting because I think, you know, in my 30 years in this profession, I haven't seen a whole lot of wholesale change in the direction of how we approach landscape design or landscaping and landscape architecture. And I think the work of Pete, what's his last name? I was booked in the back, okay. Is anyone aware of Piet's? Thank you. Landscapes. He did the design for, this is the High Line in New York City, and this is Millennium Park in Chicago. And there, you know, he's pretty much a garden landscape designer. And what he's done is he's taken plants and kind of the succession of plants and the layering of plant systems from the ground level up through the structure to seasonal interest, and he's taken it to a whole different level. These landscapes may look like naturalized, oh, okay, they put a seed mix in and it just, but these are incredibly well planned out, very, very intricately designed, naturalized landscapes. And they're amazing to see. If anyone has not been to the High Line, I highly recommend it. Just seeing these landscapes, it's a mix of natives, but also ornamentals are used, and a lot looking at different structures of the plants, the seed pods, and the different seasonal interests, and really creating kind of these interesting mosaics with the landscape. It's exciting seeing these coming together, because this is what helps you know, the general public kind of see, so they're doing this here. They start to connect with what we're trying to do from more of a functional standpoint. And it ideally is going to help these types of landscapes become more you know, commonplace. So we're seeing more of it. And you know, this is actually a residence in York, Pennsylvania, and the homeowner really wanted to do something, just get rid of their lawn and kind of apply more of a natural landscape aesthetic. So again, you know, if your neighbor starts to do these types of things and you start to see these in the community, it's really a wholesale shift from what we've seen even 15, 20 years ago as to what people were looking at in their community. But the beauty of these landscapes are something that's important. Okay, now I'm going to go through a little bit. Andy's going to be here at 10, so we're going on. All right. I don't claim to be a scientist, and I'm going to go through and just kind of look at these natural cycles a little bit. I'm not going to go into them in detail. What I'm more interested in is how they relate to sustainable landscapes and what it is that we're trying to achieve with them. So from a background standpoint, this is the big picture stuff, but we've got the hydrologic cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the phosphorus cycle. And each of these cycles are integral to the built environment, and these are the cycles that we can, as practitioners, look at benefiting with what we do. So The hydrologic cycle is pretty much the basis of precipitation, transpiration, groundwater flow, water quality, and these are the things related to the types of planting that we do, the amount of infiltration that we can increase, the importance of evapotranspiration. We were talking about this a little bit this morning, whether the evapotranspiration can be quantified. I haven't heard anything. We're going to kind of look that up and find out. I think there have been some studies that the SRBC has done on that. But this is, where we can start to look at. We're taking, again, beyond the aesthetic and looking at the function of what we can do with these landscapes. The carbon cycle, this looks at what we can do as far as improving our footprint and improving the soils, and at the same time improving air quality. Basic understanding of the overall carbon cycle in relationship to what we can do with the sustainable landscapes. Nitrogen cycle, looking at reducing the fertilizers and pesticides and things like that we're using in these sustainable landscapes, and really trying to make a difference in improving this cycle overall. And then phosphorus cycle, related to the soil conditions and improving the soil conditions overall, and what we can do to reduce erosion, to reduce the amount of soils that are being either eroded or being washed into our waterways. Sediment is a huge pollutant of the Chesapeake Bay, and what we do with these sustainable landscapes will make a difference there. Okay, we talk about point and non-point source pollution. The point source is really what's related to the MS4. You guys have talked a lot about that. I'm not going to get into it in detail, but just the understanding the difference between the point source and the non-point source. The non-point source is basically the runoff that's spread over a larger area, and how it discharges and picks up runoff, whereas the point source is that is basically being taken through infrastructure and then discharged at one particular point. So there is a case study that we talk about in relationship to the Chesapeake Bay, and as it enters the Chesapeake Bay, and one of the telltale signs, I think, is this red area within the bay, right at, where the discharge is from the Susquehanna, is really the prime dead zone, and it really kind of plays into what we're trying to do, looking at ways of reducing that amount of sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus that are going into the Chesapeake Bay. So that's our ultimate goal, and I think that it's a really serious issue for this Chesapeake Bay, and there's a lot of efforts that are underway right now to reduce that pollution in our waterways. So that's our ultimate goal.
I should add that's from August 2005. In 10 years, as these practices have become more prevalent, that zone is shrinking. We are showing some real tangible results based off the types of practices that you're talking about.
That's great.
Yeah, this is amazing, and I'd love to see that map if we could, because my grandfather had a cottage up at northeast near Elk Neck, and in the 70s. And I remember as a kid, it was. Well, I don't know what the stats were then. My observations, I recall fishing, and we enjoyed the bay. But he eventually sold the cottage. But then after that, it died.
Yeah.
And there was a mass exodus. People were selling out. And it's wonderful to hear that this is improving. I mean, we hear about the bay all the time up here, but we don't really realize that there are dead sections. I mean, that just strikes me as I just didn't realize how severe it is. This is a telling map.
Yeah.
This is why we're doing what we're trying to do.
Are they doing a lot in Maryland per se? I mean, I like, like around 113, I see it's all farmlands. They grow soybeans and all that stuff down there. Are they implementing these plans down there a lot? I mean, are you guys getting a lot of stuff down there?
Yeah, there's quite a bit going on in Maryland and Virginia. By no means are they perfect, but the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania really is the main contributor to the bay. So, we talk a lot about the bay. Of course, me living in Pennsylvania myself, I care more about the stream in my backyard than the bay. I work for an organization that's all about it. But, the real changes we make to our local streams, they show up on maps like this in the bay. Pennsylvania, we still have a lot of work to do, but I think it's going in the right direction. I hope so.
What always brings it home to me is whenever I'm flying out of Philadelphia and you're flying up, and especially in the wintertime, I think there were a couple times when there was snow on the ground, and you can see it. You can see that watershed. You can see all of those small tributaries and everything just feeding right into the Chesapeake Bay. And you look at maps like this, and it just becomes kind of overwhelming. And when you're driving around in the landscape, and you see little tiny bits and pieces of it. But to kind of step up and look at it from the bigger picture, it's like, wow, it's all connected. And we're seeing more and more improvements. And you take a little piece at a time. I often look at the Lidditz Run watershed, which we started working with this group probably about 15 to 17 years ago. And it's in our community, it's the watershed, and what they started to do was just to do, the Trout Unlimited group started doing stream restoration projects right in the stream, putting habitat devices and things like that. And, well, it's grown to the point where stream restoration, floodplain restoration, stormwater BMPs have been implemented. I mean, there's probably over 50 to 60 projects that have been implemented within this watershed in the last 15 years. And they've actually achieved water quality improvement in that only a couple, I guess 3 years ago, the Lidditz Run was improved from a warm water fishery to a cold water fishery. So that's the type of quantification that, okay, they chipped away little pieces at a time. It was one dairy farmer put some, started to fence off his stream. Another one started to plant some trees, and it was little bits at a time. But once you see that, wow, there is a benefit, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, it's really encouraging. And so that's, I think, again, everyone has their small little piece of the world that we're looking at, but if you chip away at it and do a little bit at a time, you can start to see a lot of results. So this was really a case related to the pesticide and chemical use, and that's something that we're really, with these sustainable landscapes, we're really looking at reducing. The native plants, and Andy will be talking about this later, we talked a lot about it yesterday, was the fact that we're trying to create these indigenous or native plant communities that are comfortable in this location and don't require a lot of help with the sort of fertilizers and adding pesticides and things like that. So this industry, I think, is something that is hard to go up against too. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry nationwide. Lawn care, fertilizers, and things like that. So you're going against, kind of that driving force that residents and the general public are exposed to continuously. So again, looking at ways that the economic benefits of this to regular homeowners, and then the additional benefits, kind of educating and kind of getting the word out that it's okay. Ecological footprint, so looking at human impacts and carbon neutral, we hear a lot about that, and being lighter on how we live on the land. So overall, bigger picture, but kind of looking at that from an overall standpoint. So this is another one of those bigger picture looks at how reducing the human impacts on the landscape, and this is John Rogers came up with these 5 measures of a healthy yard and their benefits, and it really ties into what we were just talking about. So it's that biodiversity, habitat diversity, the carbon balance, the water balance, the nutrient balance, and the chemical avoidance. That pretty much sums it up as to what we're trying to do. So